The inevitable has finally happened. The Titans have fired head coach Brian Callahan. I did a live stream reaction to this to talk to you guys and get your comments, but now we are going to dive a little more in depth. I'm joined by James Foster today. Justin Melo still out on vacation, and we're going to talk why now and what's next for the Titans. This is the Music City Audible. Let's get to it. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Music City Audible podcast presented by Sinkers Beverages, the premier wine, spirits, and beer store in East Nashville. I'm Justin Graver. Joining me today, not as always, James Foster. You know him, you love him. I don't think there is a person on this planet who watches more film, NFL film, than James Foster. James, thank you for sitting in on the show today. How's it going?
It's going great. Man, I never thought the day would come, but I am pretty happy that the Titans have moved on from Brian Callahan.
How surprising was the timing of this to you? Because I think after the first 4 games or so, it felt like it could be imminent, right? And one more loss could do it, especially a bad loss. And then they go out and beat the Cardinals on one of the flukiest wins you'll ever see in terms of the mistakes the Cardinals made. And there was maybe a belief, at least for some people, that bought him a little more time and potentially bought him the rest of the season. And then, of course, they look like crap again against the Raiders, and he loses his job. What was your, how shocked were you when this news came down?
I wasn't very surprised at all. I think if you were going to tell me that they were going to make a midseason coaching change, I think this is the time to do it, because the Raiders game was probably the worst game of the season, considering how bad Vegas is, how just completely ineffective the offense looked from top to bottom. And I think, when you consider the Vrabel matchup coming up next week and the interim coaching boost that seems to happen, I don't really blame her for kind of just a Hail Mary effort.
And when you say her, of course, you're referring to owner Amy Adams Strunk, who, if we want to really get into the why behind why now, I think is a big question for Titans fans. I think, so Easton Freeze just put an article out where he theorized based on what he knows. It's been reported that the Titans fired Brian Callahan without a plan for the interim head coach. And I talked about this briefly on the live stream I just did, where maybe they're interviewing their internal candidates, briefly, not very in depth, but just getting a pulse on who would be interested in doing the interim job and who should take over. But in hindsight, you'd think that that's something they know they know what they're going to do before they pull the trigger on firing a guy, is that they have somebody ready to step into the role. Because now, how long are the players going to be left in limbo wondering who their coach is? The players are not in the building today, it was reported, which is unusual for a Monday, especially a Monday after a loss. So that's just an interesting side note to all this. But the fact that they don't have a plan in place, at least Easton wrote, indicates that this didn't come from Chad Brinker and Mike Borgonzi. This came from the owner, who basically sent down a mandate and said, just do it. I don't want this guy to lead our team anymore. I don't care if you have a plan or not. So if that is true, I think there's 2 ways to look at it. Number one, the Titans had, before they fired Brian Callahan, Amy Adams Strunk had already built a reputation as somebody who is going to be impatient, quick trigger to fire people. Fired John Robinson infamously right after A.J. Brown torched the Titans in his first game back in Nashville. And I think Easton wrote that she didn't want to have that perception again. Whereas this firing, as I said at the top, was inevitable. It was going to happen either in season or at the end of the season. That much we had learned already. There was not a lot he could do, barring the team completely inexplicably becoming a different team over the rest of the season. So to have already fired somebody on what felt like or appeared to be a reactionary move after John Robinson got dismissed, then a few years later, if your former head coach comes to town and beats you, and that's the final straw that you fire another head coach or another high-ranking member of the staff because of something reactionary like that, right, and personal and emotional, that would just be a terrible look. So they almost had to do it before the Patriots game
so that it wasn't
to
because
avoid
of
looking like that, right?
I hadn't thought about that angle, but that actually makes a lot of sense. Because it wasn't. I don't think anybody's going to criticize Amy for firing Brian Callahan aside from like, she might get some adjacent criticism just because she's been quick to pull the trigger in the past. But I don't think this move specifically any Titans fan would have any criticism of. Who would be your pick for interim? I'm looking at the Titans coaching staff, and
my pick for interim would be Mike McCoy. And I've talked about this a couple times. I'm curious to get your thoughts. Mike McCoy is my choice because it allows everyone else on the staff to maintain their current role. Yeah. The more I think about it, the more I wonder if that's a good thing, because like the only unit that's performing well is special teams. I also think it's very hard to judge the defense because they've multiple weeks this season played really well early. And then when it becomes clear that the offense doesn't have it today, the dam starts to break. Or as Brian Callahan put it on Sunday, they get a little leaky. So it's hard to know if that's just like a psychological component of trying to be good when it doesn't matter if you allow 5 points or 55 points. Your offense isn't going to score enough points to help you either way. That can make it harder to play defense. So I don't know necessarily how good or bad the defense really is because of that. But I do think it's usually best practice to keep everyone in the roles that they're in. We saw it. I've talked about this reference a few times, this example. The Jets last year, Jeff Ulbrich was the defensive coordinator, Robert Saleh the head coach. Their defense under Robert Saleh was, I think, like the best in the NFL in terms of EPA per play, or at least it was it was up there. They fire Saleh, they promote Ulbrich from DC to head coach. Now Ulbrich has to worry about all the responsibilities that come with being a head coach. He can't focus on being a defensive coordinator. The new guy that's promoted to defensive coordinator hasn't done that before, and now he's trying to learn on the fly how to be the defensive coordinator. If you take any person out of the Titans role that they're in now, Bones Fossil's the other very popular pick. Some people also really want Denard Wilson to be the interim head coach. Either of those guys, you're going through a shuffle like that, where if you want that person to retain the play calling responsibility they have on that unit, then you're adding the head coaching duties on top of that. Very difficult to just take that on mid-season when you don't have time in the offseason to come up with a plan for how you're going to handle it. Or you're promoting someone who hasn't done that job yet this year to be the play caller in that situation. Either of those don't sound like a recipe for improvement, which is you fire Brian Callahan because you're looking for improvement. That's why my choice would be Mike McCoy. I wouldn't be upset if it was Bones Fossil because he's done it before. Not only has he done it before, he did it before when the team had drafted a rookie quarterback number 1 overall, when Jared Goff had been drafted by the Rams and Jeff Fisher got fired midseason. That's when Bones Fossil became an interim head coach. So he's literally been in this almost exact situation. I wouldn't hate it if he was the choice. If it's anyone else, I'm going to question why it's anyone else. And I think the chances that they bring in someone from outside the organization to be interim head coach are like 0.1%. I think that would be a foolish, very strange move. But I'm curious where you come down on the interim head coach discussion.
I'm right with you. I mean, that's what I was saying, where it was hard for me to think of an interim head coach because really the 2 or 3 people that I know are somewhat qualified, I want them in another role because I don't want to create another weakness. Now, you have that conversation and it's like, what is ultimately the downside of creating another weakness this year? You know? And it's like, is Denard Wilson our defensive coordinator of the future? Probably not. So if we, waste him on an interim head coach, does it have that much of a long-term impact? But I agree with your assessment of the defensive coaching staff, at least I think, where I have issues with how the linebackers respond to play action boot is the biggest consistent weakness that this defense has. There's criticisms that I would have, but ultimately you've got a defensive roster with the worst pass rushing personnel on the edge in the NFL. You've got one good pass rusher, replacement level. I would say Cedric Gray's better than replacement level. You've got decent linebackers, poor secondary. It's just not a good defensive roster. And, they perform worse in the fourth quarter, when they're down 21 points and they've been on the field the whole game. But ultimately, I think it's a really stingy defense that if they had a similar caliber offense to go along with it, I think it could combine for a pretty good team.
And that's what you hope to see through the rest of this season. Another thing I wanted to bring up on the timing of this is something that I noticed in the Raiders game. Shout out Tic Tac Titans, Tyler Rowland on Twitter tweeting some of these examples, and some Raiders reporters tweeting out some quotes. that were interesting to me. Landon Roberts, linebacker for the Raiders, said after the game, I looked for this sound because I really wanted to play it. It doesn't seem that anyone actually recorded it, but said after the game, specifically talking about Devin White's blitz that went completely unblocked and resulted in a strip sack, Raiders fumble recovery at the 2-yard line, said that that was a look they had seen on film, that they'd repped in practice, and that he knew, quote, he knew that Devin White was going to get through untouched. They knew exactly how the Titans were going to play that, and it worked exactly the way they drew it up. There are other indications on the tape of Raiders defenders signaling before the snap, Tony Pollard run, for example, exactly which gap the run is designed to go through based on, I don't know, formations and tendencies that they've studied on film from the Titans. The Titans had reached a point where the defense they were playing, a defense that allowed 40 points the week before, knew exactly what plays the Titans were running in this game and knew exactly strategically, schematically, how to attack the Titans' pass protection. Like, they knew what this is. You can't leave that head coach in place, the person in charge of the offense, that another team, if the Raiders can do it, a bad team, then Mike Vrabel, who, like, his greatest strength as a head coach was specifically game planning for particular offenses, especially good offenses. The Titans are not that, of course.
And
but like,
creating pressure plans.
Exactly. Like those, you can't leave that staff in place or you're setting up your quarterback to get murdered in the pocket against his defense. But any good NFL coach worth their salt, game planning wise, is going to identify all the things the Raiders identified. And you can't at this point have any faith that the Titans are going to self-scout and correct those issues themselves, right? That to me is maybe a bigger thing than what's looming on the schedule with the Patriots game and the perceptions of being an emotional, trigger-happy, firing organization, whatever. Like, once you've reached that point where the other team knows what's coming on a week-to-week basis and down-to-down basis, you can't continue with that staff in charge because you have literally no hope for success at that point. Yeah.
And I mean, I agree with that. It's just, I wonder how much potential there is to change, because how much new install can you do if there wasn't, we're assuming that the interim coach is going to be someone that's already on the staff. Well, if somebody on the staff, knew that Tennessee's pressure was hackable, or their protection plan was hackable, then they would have, forwarded that to Brian Callahan. So, it's a tough situation. I mean, ultimately, if you're prioritizing them having success this year, I think it's a losing bet. But as far as development for the future, the type of game that happened yesterday, like Cam Ward can't keep having those and develop the way that we want him to. Even just ignoring his play, like if there's protection busts every single third down and he doesn't even get a rep to like read the field, hit his second read, whatever it is, if he's just getting swallowed right off the snap every play, then he's not going to develop. And like the results on the field obviously aren't going to be good, but I'm really focused on Cam Ward's development for next year and the rest of the young offensive players.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because you're right. Like, the goal with this firing isn't to turn into a playoff team. That's right. Almost mathematically impossible. It's not technically impossible, but almost mathematically impossible. And forget the math. We've seen this team play. We know the talent level. That's nobody's expectation. But you have to stop the bad habits. You say Cam Ward's not going to develop. The only thing he's going to develop are bad habits. And you're already seeing that come to fruition where he has been sped up. Again, Tyler Rowland posted a clip from the All-22 today, and I was going through the All-22 a bit. I haven't had a chance to go all the way through it yet, but noticed something really, like, a good observation, that he's got receivers who are breaking open downfield in, somewhat slower developing plays, but he's checking it down before they even get to the top of their route, because it's being drilled into his head by the coaching staff. Get rid of the ball. And you hear him talk about this on Wednesdays when he goes to the podium. It's one of the things he's harped on almost every week, is like, I just need to get the ball out of my hand, get it in the hands of my playmakers. That's true. Of course, that's true. But there's also an overcorrection element to it, or a point where if that's the only thing he's thinking when he catches a snap is, I got to get rid of the ball, I got to get rid of the ball, I got to get rid of the ball. He's going to be sped up. He's not going to go through his progressions. He's not going to let routes develop. And he's going to be early on throws like we've seen this year in against the Colts with the back shoulder attempt to I.M. Manor. He even said in the postgame he was early on that throw. He's rushing because this coaching staff is getting into his head and putting bad habits into him. He's also going to start seeing ghosts in terms of pressure and try to escape clean pockets because he's just going to expect every snap is going to be under pressure because that's, almost 40% or whatever of his snaps this year have been under pressure. Those are bad habits that are going to be forming. We saw the same trajectory with Will Levis. I mean, I still can't sit here and say I think Will Levis would be fine in another system. Like, Will Levis made horrible turnovers that were completely on him. No, it wasn't coaching staff's fault that he was committing some of those turnovers. But we saw a regression. We saw a guy who looked like he was in his head and overthinking. And I'm starting to see the same thing with Cam Ward. Do you think that that is a valid thing that I'm seeing, or am I sort of projecting because I already don't like the coaching staff?
Yeah, I don't know if I would say like overthinking, but I think that one kind of mental process you're correct on, which is that he is cycling through his first reads quicker than he was earlier in the season. I mean, he had 38 pass attempts against Vegas. 13 of those were behind the line of scrimmage, and just like estimation, I would say probably 7 were screens, 5 or 6 were checkdowns. So there were. I mean, I was just doing my film breakdown for 440 Sports, and there weren't even really that many downfield throws to talk about. It's
right.
Like it was by far the most boring film breakdown I've done this year, but. Yeah, I mean, at the same time, though, I've been watching his tape for the first 5 weeks and saying he needs to get the ball out quicker. So if he overcorrects, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. I think ultimately, I think it's from how Cam Ward is, I think it'll be easier to reverse back and have him, tell him to be more aggressive, pushing the ball downfield, than it would be to reel in Jameis Winston or get Daniel Jones to be aggressive and anticipatory. Like, we're not trying to change his nature. He's already aggressive attack downfield. We've kind of neutered him a little bit to where now he's getting the ball out, more prioritizing the check down. I think it's possible to, return back to normal.
I agree. And I think I've been saying this since almost the season started and it became clear that this wasn't going to work out with Callahan, that get Callahan away from Cam Ward as fast as possible so that you can get him back to being himself. He needs good coaching. Every rookie quarterback needs good coaching. And you see it all around the league right now. Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, guys that were left for dead by the organizations who drafted them, who have, since been through multiple coaching staffs since those guys were drafted, been through multiple other quarterbacks, haven't found success at all in any kind of sustained way. Maybe one good season here or there. The Browns actually went to the playoffs with Baker Mayfield before they gave up on him. So it's just another reminder that patience does matter. However, patience with the wrong person in charge is not patience. It's just foolishness. And the Titans Jordan Schultz reported this. Easton also sort of reported this, that the Titans' intention this season was to not fire Brian Callahan. They wanted to get through the whole season and give him that whole time to evaluate him and also to see if he could find improvement. But it got so bad that they basically had no choice but to make this move now because there has not been a shred of improvement across this team. They continue to look lifeless in first quarters. They haven't scored a first quarter touchdown this season. That's incredible. Their scripted plays are among the worst in the NFL in terms of EPA per play on scripted series. That's the time you're supposed to be your best. What's going on with the scripted offense? I love to get your film breakdown thoughts because, again, nobody watches more film than you, and your ability to see things on that film as well. It's not just that you watch it. You have to be able to understand what you're seeing. So I'm really excited to talk to you. We had a whole plan to talk about the things this offense was doing that were putting players in a poor position to succeed, and then Callahan gets fired this morning, or this afternoon, I guess, whatever time it was. But can I just ask you what your thoughts were on the scripted plays? Because Titans fans all know they open with run, 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 screen, screen. And Callahan said in the post-game presser that it was part of the script to open with run, run. And then they found themselves in a short yardage situation and figured we can run to get this. Now, it's 3rd and 3, if I'm not mistaken, when they hand that ball off. It's not like it's 3rd and 1 or 3rd and inches and they figure they can pick it up on the ground. But what are your thoughts on like the scripted plays the Titans have run? Do they look any different from what they're doing the rest of the game? Like why are they so bad on those opening drives?
I haven't sat down and specifically charted their scripted plays to see, specifically what's different, but it does seem to fit right in with the rest of their offense. I would guess probably like 3 or 4 of the 6 games they have started with a play action bootleg, some kind of rollout, like levels concept to the sideline. And Cam Ward has really struggled to execute those from a processing standpoint. Like he's generally pretty accurate rolling out to his left, even especially, but it's like really a simple kind of 3-level read, and he struggles to get through those and get rid of the ball. So those haven't been very effective. The thing is, I think that's clearly the offensive concept that they feel the most comfortable with. And to run that, it does require establishing the run. And so I get the urge to, come out with 2 straight runs, but I think that running on 3rd and 3 was probably a bad choice. My least favorite play that they run, they've kind of stopped it recently, but those like orbit motion runs that they do, where they'll have somebody motion like running backs to his right, and then he'll like loop around and then come around the left, and then he'll hand it off. And it's just the slowest developing play that doesn't trick anybody. So I would say scrap that from the playbook to whoever the new interim is.
Yeah. One thing I'm really curious to find out, first of all, who's going to become interim offensive coordinator / play caller. We don't know if Nick Holtz is out or not. I'm going to assume that Nick Holtz, Bill Callahan are following Brian Callahan out the door, but there's no guarantee of that. But I'm going to also assume that Bo Hardigree is going to continue calling the plays here. And you mentioned this a little bit off the top, that if the staff and the play callers is not really changing, then can we really expect anything about this offense and those tendencies that are being seen by the Raiders on film or whatever to change? One thing that gives me a little hope in that regard is that when Josh McDaniels was fired by the Raiders and Bo Hardigree became interim offensive coordinator, he changed a lot philosophically about what that offense was doing in terms of how often they're running play action, motion before the snap, RPO concepts. All that stuff shot up when he took over. And none of those things really changed when he took over play calling in Tennessee. Of course, he was still under the direction of Brian Callahan. And especially, I think, like maybe Callahan on a random second quarter drive is letting Hardigree do his thing. But, they cross the 50 with a minute to go before halftime, or it's a 4th and 1 from the 40. Like Hardigree doesn't have the freedom in those situations to get in there. Game planning throughout the week. What do we want to do? What do we want to be our identity this week? What are some of our staple plays? Callahan's heavily involved still in all of that stuff. So I'm wondering if now that Hardigree is free of the shackles of Brian Callahan, if any of those things will change, or if the guys still in the building really believed in what they were doing. Something that was interesting to me from last night's pressers was Cam Ward was asked, do you still believe you should be staying the course if staying the course hasn't worked for you at all? And Cam Ward said something along the lines of, I think in some areas, we need to stay the course, but yeah, we need to go try anything. Like we need to try it. What we're doing is not working. We need to go try new things. And it doesn't feel like, at least from my observations, that this staff had been trying new things on a week-to-week basis to jumpstart the offense. Like it's really frustrating. What did Einstein say was the definition of insanity? Is trying the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. I feel like that's been the Titans offense under Brian Callahan for 25, how many games? 23 games. And they never tried new things. So is Bo Hardigree going to be able to try new things now? Or are they going to keep doing the same crap that hasn't been working?
Yeah, I guess depending on how I want the offense to look as different as possible next week, not even just because of the offense, but because that would indicate that they have completely abandoned everything about Brian Callahan. Like the more new stuff we see offensively, the more that tells me, okay, Brian Callahan, like this was really his scheme and they were kind of tethered to that. And now that he's gone, they're bringing in all the new ideas that they suggested and he wouldn't do, whatever. So the more of that we see, then the more that'll kind of make me optimistic for the future that there could actually be some significant change. Now the conversation kind of ends when we talk about actual season results, because I still think the team is so bad that, they're a competitive 4-13, I think is probably the best case scenario. But, like we said, Cam Ward's development is priority one.
There's one last thing I want to ask you about, James, just based on what you've seen on film and some common, I think, thoughts that Titans fans have been having over the past few weeks. Real quick before I get to that, a reminder that this podcast is brought to you by Sinkers Beverages, the premier wine, spirits, and beer store in East Nashville. Go to sinkersbeverages.com or check out the link in this video description to join the In Crowd. In Crowd members get access to allocated wines and spirits, exclusive events, early access to barrel releases, and more, and it's completely free to join the In Crowd. So check out sinkersbeverages.com today. One other reminder to all of you watching, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, drop a comment below. You can find James's great work, film breakdowns for the 440 Sports channel, Hot Read podcast. He also writes for Wide Left, and a buddy of mine, Arif Hassan, who we have on Heed the Call podcast a few times. He's been on this show a few times, so nice to see you doing great work over there for Wide Left. James, the last thing I want to ask you about, again, this is something that has been a common sort of refrain from Titans fans, is that the Titans aren't doing any of the things that Cam Ward was successful with in college. They aren't running RPOs. They aren't doing the sort of switch, vert, seam, throw, release type, whatever, I don't know what I'm saying, stuff that he excelled at in college. I've been calling for them to spread the field more, stay in a 5-man protection with lots of answers for wherever the pressure might come from, and allow him to see more versus these condensed formations they've been running. Is this a real thing? Are Titans fans right? Because most Titans fans who say this are watching the broadcast on game day, and they're not rewatching the game because the Titans lost terribly, and nobody wants to relive that. They're definitely not going and watching the film. I'm talking about the majority of the fans calling out for these things. Are you seeing this? Is this real? Are we right to be mad about the things that we've been mad at?
So I don't know that I would make the criticism that he isn't doing stuff that plays to Cam's strengths, and I don't think I would contrast it to college. I mean, the RPO game is just nowhere near as prevalent in the NFL as it is in college. So you could kind of say that for every college quarterback is they're good at RPOs. That's just not really something that's going to be the staple of an NFL offense. I think the things that he does best are throwing to the intermediate sideline, so 8 to 15 yards, and I feel like they do a good amount of that. And then throwing down the seam, which he does a lot, and his receivers drop every single one. So, and then I think the third thing would be rolling out to his left, throwing on the run, and they do a ton of bootlegs. So yeah, I would actually disagree with that wholeheartedly, but that's not an endorsement of the offense, obviously.
I had a feeling you were going to disagree with that, which is why I teed you up, because I've been, guilty of being one of the people saying they need to do more things to play to Cam's strengths. That's
the criticism that I would make of the offense, the Will Levis offense. What Will Levis does best is play action. You've got a deep post and a dig. You've got 2 routes. You don't have a ton of defenders that you've got to, you don't need the spatial awareness to understand where they are on the field. You really just have to make 1 or 2 simple decisions and have a big arm. And that's what Will Levis brings to the table. So I would have liked to see a lot more of the 2019 Ryan Tannehill offense with Will Levis. And I think that the scheme that they had for Levis, I think, speaks to Callahan's inability to fit an offense around his personnel, more so than this year does.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think the biggest problem the Titans had was giving Cam Ward time to throw and his receivers catching the ball. But there was also a lot of situational stuff that the coaches weren't doing well, that he wasn't doing well. You can't throw an interception once you cross into the midfield for the first time and you're in field goal range and you're about to get points for the first time all game. You can't throw an interception there. You got to make that decision. If you're going to throw it away, you got to do it faster. That's not on the coaching staff. But I do think a lot of the way that We have no idea how they're coaching these quarterbacks behind the scenes. All I know is what my eyes tell me, and that Will Levis was a promising but definitely flawed quarterback his rookie season, who looked way worse the next season under Brian Callahan. And I think we sort of excused the coaching staff for that at the time, because it was like, oh, well, he didn't play that much as a rookie, so this is just who he really is, and defenses have more tape on him and they know how to stop him. Now that we've seen Cam Ward sort of go down the same path, I'm more prone to blaming the coaching staff for not coaching these quarterbacks in a way that gets through to them and allows them to go play free and fast and be successful. So we'll see if the next staff can do that. We'll have plenty of time to talk about who the next head coach of the Tennessee Titans will be. Right now, I'm more curious to find out who the interim coach will be. I hope we get that information soon. It's strange to me that they still haven't made an announcement and still don't know. But at some point, we'll have that info and we can react to it. James, thanks for joining us today, sitting in for Justin Melo. You were great, and we'll get you back on the pod soon, part of the 440 Sports family. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, that'll do it. Until next time, remember to like, subscribe, drop a comment. Y'all stay safe out there. And tighten up.
A Broadway sports media production.